Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, in which we have a casual and informal discussion about Star Trek: The Next Generation. And today's episode is going to be Up the Long Ladder. I'm joined once again by Trekker Prize. Hello.
Hello, Starfleet Boy.
I don't know why I have to
Nice to
say
be
it
back.
like that. Trekker Prize.
I don't have to be dramatic. I'm not like that.
How are you doing? Good morning.
Be
Or good
back.
afternoon. It's nice to have you back. Good evening and good morning it's good morning
yes.
here at Starfleet
It's
headquarters.
Good evening in here almost.
Now you're in London, so that means you're, according to the Kelvin timeline, that's where Section 31 does all its.
They didn't blow up any building yet.
Thank goodness. That's yeah, that was
Imagine.
pretty crazy. Anyway, so yeah, I'm gonna start referring to you as the Section 31 commander.
Oh, what a privilege.
So I guess we'll jump right into the episode summary. I often will give my co-hosts the opportunity to give the summary. So if you feel like you want to do that, you're welcome to actually give the summary of the episode. Otherwise, I'm ready to go.
That's very flattering, but I think I will give it to you as a chance to, you got used to it.
Okay, fine. That's totally fine with me. So this episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, called Up the Long Ladder, aka Attack of the Clones, is a really interesting episode, to say the least. It starts off with Worf having some kind of ailment on the bridge and a distress signal, and the crew of the Enterprise are kind of like trying to figure out where it's coming from in the beginning. And funny enough, Commander Riker, who's shown on multiple occasions the ability to do some pretty extraordinary things without the use of a computer, is able to recognize the signal as an SOS, even though it took like hours and hours for Starfleet
Years.
to figure it out. All they needed to do was call Commander Riker. Anyways, the SOS is heard, and they figure out that the ship that's broadcasting is from 21st century Earth, and so that means a little bit ahead of us. Maybe probably at the early 21st century. It was carrying a bunch of computers and livestock, oddly enough, and it got lost. And so they figure out that it's on a nearby planet, which is about to be toasted by solar activity. So they realize that there are about 250 to 300 colonists there underground, hiding in caves, probably because of the planet's situation. And Commander Riker sent down. He reports back that it's okay to beam all the colonists aboard. They're willing to leave their planet and be relocated, but there is a complication, which Picard's like, just get them aboard. It doesn't matter. And so when they come aboard, all of a sudden we see that the complication is that they bring aboard their livestock, and they're not the colony that everyone expected them to be. They're very anachronistic, as Dr. Pulaski describes them to be, and they basically have no modern technology whatsoever, and it's as if they were still in an agrarian pre-industrial revolution society, which is odd because they were anachronistic, I guess, at their time as well. But anyways, pretty funny bunch of scenes, but also a little bit stereotypical. The colonists seem to be descendant of the Irish. I'm not really 100% sure, but
I think there's some connections.
Yeah, some connections there, and with last names like Odell. And anyways, we meet the leader of the colony, Danilo Odell, and his daughter, and that leads to some interesting situations, especially with Commander Riker. So then, in the midst of all this, kind of weirdness, Danilo Odell asks Captain Picard, "Well, have you heard from the other colony?" And Captain Picard's like, "Other colony? What?" And that's where the that's where the Mariposans come in. By the way, the first colony is called the Brinloidi, and then the Mariposans are a colony of clones, which we quickly discover. And so what happened was apparently something happened where the ship's crew and the passengers had to separate. The one colony ended up on the planet where they got to they had their resources like their livestock and so on. And then the other colony, unfortunately, started out with just 5 humans, but they had enough technology to create clones. So there's like hundreds and hundreds of people who are clones of each other. And unfortunately, when we meet the Mariposans, we discovered that their cloning procedure has some flaws, something called what was it, generational degeneration, or I can't remember,
Neither
something.
do I.
It was something. Let me see, I think I might have written it down. It was called something fading. That's what it was, but I can't remember what it was. Oh well. Anyways, I'm sure I'll remember as we discuss the episode. But anyways, the cloning technology doesn't really work as as a long-term solution. So the at first there's a little bit of a struggle, and the episode gets really dark, and Commander Riker and Dr. Pulaski are kidnapped and their genetic material stolen, and then the Mariposans start making clones of them without their permission. And when all that's resolved, finally Captain Picard suggests that the Brinloidi and the Mariposans come together and do it the old-fashioned way, and that will solve all the cloning problems. And so even though the Mariposans are repulsed by the idea of being with the Brinloidi, the two cultures decide to give it a go because there's really no other choice. And that's the end of the episode. Voila.
Quick and easy.
Quick and easy. I guess we'll just jump right into our episode discussion. And I want to start off with a question I have for you. And that is, if given the opportunity, if you were in the situation and, all of a sudden Captain Picard puts a ship-wide call and he's like, anyone who wants to help these guys out, they need genetic material to be cloned. Would you give yourself to be cloned, or would you do as Commander Riker says and say no?
Well, I think I would go with the answer of Commander Riker with a twist, because Commander Riker said actually one Riker is unique, it's individual, it's precious, but millions of them or thousands of them, it's just not sustainable. But in my case, I would definitely say one Gary is quite enough on its own. So I don't think there's I think there's big moral implications in this case. Thinking about creating a new life looking like me, it will have the same memories what I have, because I'm pretty sure with the cloning process they have all the memories from the previous host. But I don't know, I wouldn't be comfortable. How about yourself? What do you think about this process?
That's an interesting point. I mean, I don't know that your memories would translate. I think that my impression of the way that the cloning worked on Mariposa was that it's a whole new individual. It's just physically they look exactly like. So each each version of you would start from scratch. Like, in other words, I don't know. I that's an interesting.
So would you reckon they actually reprogram the mind as well during the process of the?
I guess maybe they give it like basic ideas, like, they can, so that it knows how to walk and talk and things like that. The clone version of you would have all these basic things, because obviously they're not starting out as children, like as we saw in the scene where Riker and Dr. Pulaski destroyed their clones. They were growing them almost full grown, which is really creepy. But I guess
Yeah.
um I guess the way to do it would be to start your clones off as children, I think, and that would be a better solution because then they could grow up and have their own experiences and things like that, but it's not very efficient. So I guess the implication is you're right. They probably do start off with the memories of the original host and then build from there on. So it is even creepier than I thought it was.
And
Uh,
not just that. I mean, if you think about the even a transplant, if they do like heart, not heart transplant, but like a liver transplant, sometimes the new person who gets the liver, they actually remember things from the person who actually had that liver. So it's and basically that's because of the DNAs are
well,
start to
there's a really interesting kind of that reminds me of something that was popular in science fiction or just I'm not sure if it was ever I'm not sure if this has ever really been proven in any significant way, but a lot of people have a concept of cellular memory, saying that our memories are not just stored in our neurons, but they're also perhaps stored within other cells in our body. So your story about maybe the liver of a transplant, providing the transplant with memories of the previous owner of the liver is spooky but possible. So
I know it's gonna be totally off topic, but actually, I've just got the image from Alien, the Alien franchise. The third movie, Ripley dies to with the Alien Queen, and in the fourth movie, they actually clone her out of one of
oh,
her
that's right.
hair, and she didn't even know who she is at the beginning. It's like, why am I here? Why am I in this laboratory? What's happening? And then they actually tell her you're a clone of yourself. But she was totally aware of everything. I mean, she thought she was just had a memory glance or something.
Yeah, so I mean, it can go. I guess it can go either way, but to answer my question to you in response in return is yes, I actually would give myself to the
Okay, that's
cloning
interesting.
process because I wouldn't see it as like me being multiplied and no longer individual. I would see it as helping, possibly helping these people, but at the same time just because someone looks like me doesn't mean that they are me. So I have a stronger sense of my individuality than just, than a clone. Now it would be weird to run into my clone every now, let's say that the Mariposa colony takes off and there's like 300, Sohails and some of them join Starfleet. Some of them join Starfleet, and then I have to. Maybe I'm a captain, and I have to now have a ensign on my ship that's like me, me cloned, which would be really, really strange.
And
But
actually, I was thinking it actually this question and this multiplying one individual comes back to the episode Measure of a Man, when
Mhm.
they actually wanted to duplicate data as many times as they can, and there they had this issue there as well. It's like one data is unique, one data is a precious thing, but then what's going on if you have hundreds of them? I mean,
Right.
of course, in terms of data, because he's an android, not like not like a, let's say, human being, even if it's a clone, but kind of have the same similarity
I
in
would approve of clones of myself if I could be guaranteed that, or at least if I knew that they would have their own minds and experiences. Like I would not approve of a full grown clone. I would want, if they were going to clone me, I would insist that like you raise them from children, you know, and
Mhm.
let them have childhoods and experiences that are their own. Because then after that, now you do have uniqueness. I think it is the experiences that we're all born on Earth, right? We all have a lot of similarities. One might think that every human would grow up to be the same, but it's the nuances of our experiences growing up, our childhoods, the things that we learn and the things that we choose to learn that make us who we are. So I think that like if a cloned individual or a cloned version of myself were allowed to have um their own unique experiences, then I think they would end up being uh, very individual. It's like in Attack of the Clones. Speaking of, the fun little reference there, but you see on Camino the process of how they raise the clones, and while they're accelerating their aging. You can see that each clone is experiencing the exact same like experiences, and that's why all the clones in Star Wars are so similar. But if you watch the movie Clone Wars, you realize that eventually they do have their own personalities, because there's like Rex and there's like all the other clones. They look exactly alike, but they're all so different in their personalities. And I thought that was like a wonderful thing that Star Wars did in the Clone Wars animated series, to show that just because it's a clone doesn't mean it's not an individual.
Well, I have to be very honest. I never watched the show.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, if you ever get a chance, yeah, Clone Wars is it's a heavy time investment. I watched it way back when it first came out, so I got to see it every week. But I think you'd enjoy, if you like Star Wars, you'll enjoy the Clone Wars. But anyways, going back to this episode of Star Trek and that same idea, I think that's where I would approve of myself being cloned, and I wouldn't have a problem with it, because I'd know that that clone would have its own individual experiences.
Yeah, I think in this case, I can totally agree with you.
In fact, I wouldn't mind. I'm probably not going to, at this point, get married or have children. But we'll see. Who knows? But I wouldn't mind a little clone of myself to raise,
Like a mini me.
a mini me. Exactly. I wouldn't mind a mini me to raise and like pass on my vast fortunes and knowledge to. So that's an interesting thing about this episode. It does raise a lot of things. I think that the episode had a lot of good ideas, but to me, what was wrong with it was the portrayal, the kind of stereotypical portrayal of the Bryn Lloydie as like agrarian Irish people. I think that like after 300 years, there's enough time for you to develop your own. Like I can't imagine they would stay that backwards or even keep the Irish accent after all these years. They might, though, because they're very insulated. And yeah, I can't believe that they were like this in the 21st century. It's supposedly their ship left is going to leave in about 80 years to our time, like in the early 21st century, maybe even 100 years from now. So right now, if you go to Ireland and you it's like, I don't know. I haven't been to Ireland, but I have a lot of Irish friends, and they're not like boggy and like, backwards and like, boozing all the time.
No, they're not.
So I just feel like that stereotype was kind of erroneous, and they could have still had I think they would have been more like Chief O'Brien and not as as much as Danilo O'Dell, who represents to me, I think, like a huge stereotype that doesn't really exist even today.
No, maybe 50 years from now, but I mean, in the backwards in time, but
years ago.
not now.
Exactly. So that was like a weird thing, but it was humorous. I'll give it that. I mean, I did enjoy all the scenes where with the whiskey and like
yes,
the ship, the fire
this
suppression.
whiskey doesn't have a bite.
Yeah, that was good. The fire suppression unit was funny. That scene where they're trying to cook something in the cargo bay, and then they're like, what the heck was that? And
yeah, this place is like a death trap.
Yeah, it's like a death trap. It was really funny. I liked one scene that is in the beginning of the episode that I really enjoyed was the moment between Worf and Dr. Pulaski.
Oh yeah.
So Worf has he basically faints from Klingon measles, and Dr. Pulaski, he's very embarrassed, and so Dr. Pulaski covers for him when Captain Picard asks.
And Worf still insists, like, no, Klingons don't faint.
Right, he's very proud, and his ego is very bruised. Yeah. And so she covers for him, and he offers her in exchange to be a part of the what was it, the ritual with the
The
Klingon
Klingon tea ceremony.
tea ceremony. That's
Yeah.
right. And I thought that was a really sweet scene. I actually
It
remember.
is actually not just sweet; it's quite intimate. I mean,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
this is something what Worf refers to the death is as an experience to best to share, and that's how the tea comes up, because he said actually it's really deadly, quite deadly for humans. And Pulaski says like, yeah, it's quite deadly for Klingons as well. It's a challenge of power. I was
Yeah,
like,
it's true.
okay. No, but it was a really nice scene. And actually, I don't know if you knew, but there was an alternative soundtrack for that composed originally, which didn't make it to the episode, but actually it's been released later on in the TNG audio track.
Oh wow, I'll have to go listen to it. I did not know that. And how? So have you heard it? Did you hear the alternative track?
Yeah, I did. It's
Is
actually
it better?
quite emotional. Quite,
Oh, very
yeah,
cool.
it is. It is. It's good.
Well, I like that she's able to drink the tea with a simple inoculation antidote. She injects herself with the antidote to the poison, basically, and so then
Imagine
she.
one injection a day keeps the trouble away.
It's true. The miracles of Starfleet Medical. What else was interesting? I thought I read that Cole Meany, the actor who played O'Brien, was actually offended by the portrayal of the Irish
Oh, you see.
colonists. Yeah, so I don't know much more about it than just a little blurb that I read when I was like looking it up online. But I can imagine. And the funny thing is the writer of this episode wrote the episode "Measure of a Man." That was her first episode, I think, of Star Trek: The Next Generation. And so now it's the same writer, and you can actually see some of the, like what you said earlier, like the Riker, uh, how Riker, is so, turned off by the idea of being cloned, and he uses that kind of like that idea of like one Riker is unique, thousands of Rikers would not be. It's actually the same kind of idea that's expressed
Exactly.
in
With
Measure of a
data.
Man.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting in our last discussion when we were talking about the pack leads and how Geordi couldn't tell that they were lying or that they were, all that stuff. And in
Yes.
this episode, we have an example where he kind of just, he could tell that the Mariposan prime minister was lying to him. And he even says, he's like, with aliens, it's kind of hard, but with humans, I can tell every time. And it's funny that I didn't remember that, obviously, and so it was cool that we talked about it in the previous
And
episode.
not just that, I was actually thinking that actually would give us an explanation about his love life, because he wasn't really able to read the woman's with his visor.
Right, right. It's true. It's true. That would be well,
Like,
love.
you consider this like a good advantage, a big advantage against human in the dating field, and then it doesn't really seem to work.
It might be an advantage in the beginning, but like long term, I think love blinds us all. So I think that when we're in love, we don't see a lot of things that are right in front of our faces. So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good
that's good.
it's a good observation. Um, I think it's funny that Brenna, the daughter of Danilo Odell, is such a feisty and fiery personality, because the 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 crew don't really know how to respond to her, and I'm surprised because in the future there are so many women who are strong and powerful and empowered, and so I think it's funny that they are surprised by her presence and her kind of directness, but it does make for a lot of great scenes. I love the scene where she basically tells off Captain Picard and tells off Commander Riker, and she's like, have you never seen a woman before? And Riker's very clever. He responds, not until, I guess I haven't until now, and so he kind of
Yes,
starts charming her
that was a typical Riker movement.
and of course he ends up getting to sleep with her, which is also a typical Riker.
Yeah, I think I would call that a Riker maneuver, a deep look with a smile, because that's what actually he did in this quarter. But it's very interesting actually how Brina, how she is a powerful, energetic woman, and here comes Riker, and everyone seems to scare off from this woman, and here comes Riker, and even that woman is just melting down in front of him. Like, okay, this is there's this guy, and there is something about him. And then you just realize, okay, he's Riker.
Well, he's Riker, and I think what it shows is that, like, you know, he's not intimidated by strength. He's in fact, he's probably attracted to it because Counselor Troy is also very, very strong, and she definitely, like, I think is a woman who doesn't well, she's also an alien woman, so she's
Yeah,
she's raised differently perhaps, but even, I would say that, like, it is interesting that, you know Riker's confidence is what wins her over ultimately, because she does warm up to him, and she does have that very vulnerable moment where she's kind of trying to seduce him, and, talking about washing her feet, and then, when seem to he either doesn't seem to get it, or he's very polite and not,
I think he's very polite. And
he's very
then Brina was a bit, as you said, seductive, because she said, "So well, usually you start from the top and you work your way down." It's like,
right.
okay,
But
are
right
we still
before
PG-13 then?
but right before that, she does have that moment where she says, "Is something wrong?" And I thought that was really endearing and vulnerable. It showed a different side of her character, which I thought was
Mm.
great. Like, it showed a more vulnerable side. And she's like, "Don't you like women?"
And I was actually surprised how Worf really insisted to her, just like, "Oh, have you considered Starfleet security? You would
Uh,
fit."
and her response is brilliant. She's like, "Well, if it's anything like babysitting, then I can definitely do it," which I thought that was funny. Um, so the episode had this kind of, like, lighthearted, almost comedic beginning, and then it switches to very serious and very dark when we meet the clone colony. What did you think of the switch? Do you think it was done well? Like, do you think that it was awkward? What did you think of how, like, the episode changed tones all of a sudden toward the last act?
I think it was just well, when the whole transportation process finished, and just Danilo just went to the captain and just like, "Oh, but captain, just a second thought." It's like, "Have you heard about the other colonists?" And at that point, you actually thought, okay, this is like the story, and they just go into the starbase and they drop them off, and they will just see chickens in the bridge or something. But it was actually, and then you realize, okay, there's something else going on here. So there was this ship that they started to talk about at the beginning in the captain's ready room with Data, and okay, that was just one part of the story, but they actually didn't know. So it for me, it actually turned from a funny situation to a kind of a mystery to be solved
Right.
problem situation.
A mystery, and then it becomes this ethical story. It's pretty big, actually,
Yeah.
considering that nothing really, considering the lightheartedness of the beginning of the episode, it goes into a very, like, pretty philosophically heavy place after that. I thought that the I thought that the resolution of bringing the two together was, like, kind of in your face as soon as we met the other colony, and as soon as the problem became apparent that the other colony couldn't that it was a reproductive problem. I arrived to the conclusion, like, pretty much right away. I was like, "Oh, duh, just like your problem solved." Like, the colony started out together. The two colonists started out together, and now they've been separated by 300 years, and one of them has a problem. The fact that Danilo Odell even remembers the other colony. I mean, they've been on this planet for 300 years, and they've been passing on from generation to generation um, the story of how they ended up there. So they knew that there's another group of people out there somewhere that ended up on another colony. So to me, it's a little strange that they would be so aware of it, because, like, every other indication about the Bryn Lloydie is that they don't really care for technology. I'm not even sure that they, like, really have anything besides passing on their history through written accounts and oral accounts. Like that's how primitive they seem, you know. And then when we go to the
Yeah,
Mariposa,
I wouldn't go for primitive. I think I would say just more easy, more human. It's not. I wouldn't call them primitive
they're
because they're actually quite clever because they managed to survive for 300 years in a different planet, just doing farming and agriculture. So yeah, they were actually quite clever, I think. But this is just my opinion, of course.
I yeah, no, I agree with you, but I don't think the cleverness has anything to do with the advancedness. To me, it feels like maybe you're right. Maybe they chose to be primitive by our standards, because again, and Dr. Pulaski says it later on. She's like, they're anachronistic even by the 21st century standards. So these are folks that I guess chose a different lifestyle. So maybe you're right about that. Like they
Maybe they
chose
were
to,
rebels, or I
yeah,
mean, sort
not
of
rebels,
technology rebels.
technology rebels. Yeah, they might have been Luddites, you know, and didn't agree with where humanity was headed with technology. And if I'm not mistaken, they might have left Earth before World War III supposedly takes place, and like, you know, the
Yeah,
eugenics and all that. So yeah, they're from a time where things are starting to change. Interestingly enough, at the beginning of the episode, Commander Riker and Captain Picard are talking about this time period of human, you know, of the our future, their history,
yes,
uh, and he talks about the European
hegemony.
hegemony, which is basically the EU. Don't you think?
Yeah, if you think that, yeah, that's actually a quite interesting conversation what they had between. And I was thinking, and the Europe. Actually, I was reading an article about this. The European hegemony was according to their past, their history, a pre United Earth, United Nation.
Right. A pre world government.
Yeah, which is quite a cool thing to think about. And I think with the EU, and even as it started out in the US back then, to grab all the states together, and now you have a giant country, and with
Like a federation basically.
yeah, like the federation, and then you have European Union, a little bit broken and troubled, but still there. Um, um, yeah, it's a quite a good. Oh boy, it's a quite a good. Oh no,
What
can you hear me
happened?
still?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think because my. Oh boy. Okay, I can't see anything, but that's fine.
We can see you and hear you, so.
Okay, I can't see anything, but that's totally fine. That's my integrated video card messing up some every now and then.
Oh wow.
So sorry, I didn't really want to include this one to the conversation.
That's fine.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting how they actually told about this in the series, and I'm not sure, but yeah, actually that was happening already in real time. So
I think
yeah, hopefully we will get there. Hopefully we will get there.
I hope so too. It's a little discouraging, you know, on our side of the pond. We know about Brexit, of course, and then you've seen recently here, you know, the United States seems really divided at the moment too, because half the country agrees with our elected president and half the country disagrees with our elected president. So we're going through
Yes.
some interesting and tough times in Europe, in America, and then on top of all that, the entire world, you know, doesn't. It seems like there's something going on in every corner of the earth that is a little discouraging when you're hoping for, you know, like that kind of peaceful, you know, time of peace, like everyone getting along, you know, type of society. And I think it's like, I think that you know, Star Trek definitely accounts for darker times ahead. I really, that's the one thing that I've always feared and disagreed. Oh, we've lost Tracker Price. So we'll try to reinvite him to the hangout and see if that works. But we've lost him. Okay, so anyways, what I guess let's see here. Invite. This is the problem with doing a live broadcast is sometimes we have technical difficulties. um, so while we wait for Gary to come back to the show, I will just say that you know, on Starfleet Boy, I think you have heard definitely all of our opinions on things that are happening here in the United States. And, while we hope for a future where people have the freedom to be themselves and to express themselves freely and to believe in different things without fear of ridicule or oppression. We're not quite there yet. The earth itself has a long way to go, and it's very discouraging when you are so invested in the possibility of a bright and and kind of unified humanity working together to do great things like um, travel to the stars and colonize other planets, etc. Oh, here we go. I think Gary's coming back.
I
Hello.
am back. Sorry, it was a technical issue from my side.
That's okay. Are you still recording by any chance?
I'm still recording.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Then I won't stop my recording and start it again. I
No.
was just I guess you'll see it when this airs, but I was just going into I just like while we were waiting for you to come back, I just went into this like very sort of
I said, like,
peace
are you there? Are you
like
there?
well, I did this like peace, love, and happiness type thing of like let's hope that humanity, figures it out and we all do uh become a world in which people are free to express themselves and be who they are without fear of ridicule or oppression. And I think that's at the heart of what democratic American democracy tries to be. I think the European Union, I think every country says that that's the heart of what they want to be. Most countries and most people want
Yes.
that, but for some reason on Earth we haven't yet figured out how to do it so that everyone benefits. I have some thoughts on it, but my main thought is that I think that world leaders are starting to become severely out of touch with people in
Mhm.
general. I think that like when you talk to most people um, about the world, at least in my bubble, I realize I'm in a bubble. But in my bubble includes people from all over the world.
Mhm.
And I think the one thing everyone expresses is like we live in a time where we're all interconnected through digital means. Like, I'm talking to you, for example, you know,
Because the cyberspace.
across cyberspace. And like I was born in Pakistan and I grew up in America, and you were born in Hungary and you're living in London. Like we're very much uh we're very much in our in these different environments here. And the one thing I think I would love to see is that everyone be allowed to go all over the world. Like I think if there weren't any borders anymore, this is a very like wishful thought, but if there were no borders, I think the world would figure itself out. People would go where they're needed or wanted or where they feel at home. And I think the biggest problem right now is that like, in this country we want to put up walls now, and we want to put up more, we want to restrict our borders even more. And I understand it's like scary when you have all these when you have people telling you that they want to see your way of life collapse and be destroyed. And you see like the threat of terrorism and things like that. But at the same time, I think that if you are committed to a free world and freedom around the world, um, that you have to get over that fear and just like accept
Exactly. Just
accept
not
people.
accept
Yeah.
people, and this is what actually I was thinking as well during the election, because What happened is everyone got scared really and desperate, like, oh God, what's happening? It's not right. It's not right. But listening to news and watching videos over the couple of last days, and it really gives hope how some people actually sees things. And I realized, okay, I'm not gonna let things happening around me control my emotions and control my mood. So I'm the control of my I'm in the control of myself. So I have to be clever and I have to be awake. But on the other hand, as well, I have to be more optimistic, uh, because how I resonate, it will resonate in others as well. So just be hopeful and a good human being. That's what I can do, and that's what I will do. Whatever will happen,
Well said.
not
Very
give up on
nice.
standards. The same situation. Imagine when the Voyager lost in the Delta Quadrant. Captain Janeway had the option to go reckless and just get home as soon as possible and don't worry about the Prime Directive, but she decided to be as a human, to be human and be as a Starfleet captain and stand up next to the rights, what he believes in, what she believes in, and then she did it. And I don't think she made a bad decision.
No, I don't think so either. I agree with that. Yeah. So, what do you think? I think this episode actually kind of, for me, on one level, even though there were a lot of things flawed about it, I did think that there was a neat difference between the Mariposa colony and the Brinloidi, which is kind of, this is an argument that's on the table right now in the United States. It's like, there's this like huge backlash against what's perceived as elitism, and half the country says the other half of the country are elites and are trying to like, and they don't trust the way that they run governments, and the other half of the country thinks that the other half of the country are repugnant and backwards and racist, and they don't trust the way that they're running the government. And I think that like here in this episode, in an odd way, you had a micro version of that where the Brinloidi were perceived as backwards and not necessarily racist, but backwards and like, unsophisticated and undisciplined and perhaps, unfit to make decisions for a colony, or like that would progress it. And then you have the technocratic Mariposans, who the Brinloidi think are just snooty and elite and like not, and also repugnant in a way. So
Mhm.
at the end of the episode, Captain Picard kind of, when the meeting isn't going so well, and he says, I'm not going to stand for this bullying and posturing. You guys have to sit here and work together because both of your colonies depend on it, And I think that's kind of like a situation that a lot of people here in the United States are about to face. It's like we need to figure out a way to get past all of our, sort of biases and things like that,
Mhm.
and really see the other side as like the same people. We're not different, you know what I mean? Like,
Exactly. Instead of neglecting each other, just unite and work each other. That
right.
should be the
Much
right thing to do.
much easier said than done, but I think it can be done. Uh, so yeah, I thought that was a weirdly relevant thing, and that's one of the great things about fiction and science fiction, is that like these kind of strange, out there, bonkers ideas can sometimes have a relevance on actual events. And this is a show that's like now almost 30 years old, and it's
And it's still
still
relevant.
relevant, which is scary and fantastic at the same time.
It's it's incredible. Honestly, the whole phenomenon, actually, the whole Star Trek phenomenon, incredible in this case. How still you can, because at the beginning they just talked about the problems and we had those problems, and then now you realize, okay, kind of we still have the same problems. So it's never gonna run out from topics to talk about.
I think the thing that I think the thing that what's interesting about the way Star Trek works is that you're the Federation, Starfleet, humans of the of the 23rd and 24th century are at a point where they're past they've philosophically and psychologically moved past this whole idea of the other as much as possible, and like
Yes.
and I think that's like what they try to show. And like whenever we meet like um other where we do get these parallels to our current dilemmas as humans is when we meet like other, they we meet aliens or or characters that are not as evolved as the Federation is,
Like the
or
Packlets.
like the Packlets, or in this case the Mariposans and the Brinloidi. And I think that's how science fiction and Star Trek works, to kind of shed light on problems that are occurring now, and at the same time give us something to strive for or hope for. So I think that, that's always going to be a great way to tell a story. And one of the ways that Star Trek actually is still so relevant, I think, is because it while it does show problems that are very relevant to us today, it also shows us a way to overcome those problems. And that's through the example of what, the Starfleet officers and the Federation citizens are how they are presented. And it's like, oh yeah, like look at that, there's a solution. Like, so I wish that more people saw that.
Yes. In the
Obviously.
upper 10,000 especially.
But I think it's promising that there are a lot of people that do see it and that are trying to work toward um a human experience that is like that. There's a lot of exciting things going around on, like Elon Musk. Some of his ideas are extremely forward thinking, and he just recently proposed the concept of a universal income, which might
Oh.
solve, yeah, it might solve a lot of problems that we have with, people not having access to some basic needs of life.
Mhm.
So that'll be interesting. And that also that's a very Star Trek idea too, because in Star Trek, at least on Earth and in most of the Federation, there's no money that needs to be exchanged. Everyone seems to have a place to live, food to eat, and have the freedom to explore their talents and their
Yeah, and
desires
then just
and figure it out. Yeah.
exactly. It's that definitely. I think the vision what Gene actually showed us through Star Trek. It's one of the most beautiful idea, and something what we should follow instead of getting profit and fighting against each other. Just sit down to the table, talk about the problems, and don't go and send armies around the world. It's like there's no point. Definitely no point. Words has much better power than guns and other things.
Agreed. I just remembered the word that I couldn't remember for the cloning degeneration. It was called replicative fading.
Well said.
So basically, it's like if you make a copy of something digital, um, it'll never stop being the same. It's supposed to be the same every copy.
Because you will have some errors in the copying, and then if you copy the error, will be there as well,
Right.
and there will be degrades and
Exactly. Yeah. So in this case, it's analog because it's genetics, and so it's even worse because like things can happen. Right? I don't know. I think humans are still analog, right? We're not digital yet.
Well, I don't know. We are quantum digital.
So I think I think we've covered just about everything about this episode and then some. So I think it's time to give it our episode rating.
I just would go back at the
okay.
really beginning at the episode, because there was a really sweet scene between Picard and Data in the ready room.
Where he's
I don't know if you're when actually I love that, because it was just like a little banter between the two character. Picard says, it's like, oh, USS Mariposa, and Data goes like, Mariposa, that's the Spanish word for butterfly. And Picard was like, oh yes, thank you, Data. And he started to talk about the meaning of the word and everything what Picard says, and it's like, oh, I thought it should be relevant. It's like, no, it's not. Okay.
That
That
was
was a
really
very nice scene between the two characters, and also the fact when, you know, Picard assumed Riker to actually, okay, do you recognize this? Because Starfleet scientists wasn't even able to figure out the problem, what could be the signal, and he was like, oh, it's a standard SOS. It's like, why didn't he just ask Riker? It's like, he knows the answers for everything.
I know, it seems like he does. But yeah, I thought the scene between Picard and Data was really sweet also, but very funny because Data does have the tendency to babble a little bit and go off on these tangents. And so it was a good scene also because Picard's focused on the manifest of the Mariposa. Like, he's like, oh, and this is strange. There's all these computers, but then also livestock. So like, he's like trying to figure all this out, and Data's just like on another tangent altogether. I think it was cool. It did show the crew just working out a problem, like a typical problem. It wasn't like over the top. There were no space battles. I like episodes that are more showing of like everyday life on board of a starship. Of course you need the space battles every now and then, but to me, I really enjoy this kind of thing.
Yeah, but that's the thing what actually divides Star Trek from other shows, because in like in Star Wars, the main focus is it's about battles, battles and battles and battles. And I didn't watch Battlestar Galactica, but I assume that's involves lots of battle scenes as well. But Star Trek more like a philosophical sort of series. So I do enjoy the more philosophical episodes, like when they actually talk about problems, not just blow up this planet or go and destroy that ship. Something it's much unique in this way.
It's true. No, I think it is unique, and it is. I think the only other show where I've seen this kind of thing is Doctor Who. I think
Yes.
Doctor Who also deals with some really big philosophical questions, and helps to show a brighter future and a darker one sometimes too, but mostly a brighter future, which is really good.
It's all timey-wimey
It
at the
all
end.
it is all timey wimey. So Gary, what do you give this episode on a scale from 1 to 10?
Ooh, I would say I would give a 9.
Oh wow.
9, because I can't recall anything, but actually I didn't agree with it or I didn't like. I quite enjoyed the episode itself. It's sweet, it's serious, it raises a couple of questions. It's just well done.
I think that I really liked a lot of things in the episodes, but to me, watching it now with kind of my kind of some of the sensibilities I have now as opposed to when I was much younger the first time around, I was really bothered by the stereotypical portrayal of the Brit Lloydie. So that was like a big ding for me. I think that they could have been done a little bit more tastefully and originally, and not necessarily caricatures of drunken Irish people. I think they could have been shown as not embracing technology, but still very sophisticated, if you will. I think that like that's the thing that bothered me the most, is that like just because you don't, where I think it works really well is Star Trek does this again in what is it? Insurrection. Thank you.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, with the Baku village on first appearance, you think that they haven't
Haven't
they
been
don't
out of space.
yeah, haven't been in space, they don't embrace technology, and while it would have been while they revealed that they actually do have advanced knowledge, what I like is that they've chosen a non-technological hold on one second, sorry. Oh, they've chosen a non-technological lifestyle, and you can see that they're still very sophisticated, and in fact what they've developed instead is a very powerful and peaceful mind. And
Exactly.
I think that's like something that I would have loved to have seen more of in the Brinloidi, but instead we just have a lot of like I think that instead in their 300 years they've just not really made much progress as a society, or even a small society. But again, there were a lot of endearing moments. Like I really loved, you do come to love the character of, I did come to love Danilo and Brenna especially. And you know,
Yeah.
I was happy for her at the end where she's off to to charm the prime minister.
What is it?
And,
What does he do? What does he do? It's like, oh,
right.
sounds like a good job. He has a
And
lot of money.
I think it would be really interesting. And again, unfortunately, we might not ever see this, but it would be wonderful to revisit the new colony to see how the Brinloidi and the Mariposans end up. You know, after like 20 years or 30 years, that would be a fun revisit. And who knows? There's probably an expanded universe book out there, but
Maybe.
I'm gonna have to give this episode probably 7 out of 10. So 9 out of 10 for you, 7 out of 10 for me. I wonder what the doctor would say.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask his opinion on the next time we all get together. Any closing thoughts?
There's a few things that actually I noticed, and I don't recall we actually talked about it. When they were in the when they realized Riker and Pulaski, they actually missing cells from their bodies. You know, they beamed down to the laboratory, and actually they found out, okay, they actually started to cloning them, and although they rejected the process towards the Mariposan stole these cells from their bodies, and what happened is, you know, they just beamed down and they ended up killing the clones, the unfinished clones. But I asked myself, did they get actually, some approval to go down to the planet from Picard? Because that's just, they didn't even tell anything to Picard, or that wasn't really in the episode. Like, I know it's just a little point, but
No, that's really interesting. I didn't even notice that. I just felt it was completely yeah, it was. I think I was caught up in the drama that I didn't even notice that. But I would say that it's safe to assume that Picard knew what they were going to do. I don't see Riker and Worf was there too, or Geordi. Sorry, Geordi was in that scene too. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
so
yes.
I think even though we didn't see it on screen, I bet there was like a moment where Dr. Pulaski or Commander Riker were just like, "Hey, Captain, our DNA's been stolen. We have a suspicion that uh, the Mariposans are trying to clone us. Permission to go down to the planet and investigate and neutralize clones if there are ones." And he probably like thought about it for a minute and said, "Yes, permission granted." You know, so I think
No, but
just
there
as
wasn't even any implication after this happened. There wasn't even anything like Picard mentioned to the
yeah, you're
president.
right.
Like, why did you saw the it? Normally, it's a quite a big offense
But I
if
think it was
something like this happens.
I think in the discussion that they had after, they did have a discussion in the ready room afterwards where he, you know, Captain Picard is trying to present the other solution, you know, to him, and he's like, well, he's like, you can't just steal our people's genetics. And remember, he's like, well, we'll just beam all your equipment up because we need to make sure that there's no sign of our. The implication is that, you know, that we need to make sure that you're not doing anything illegal. And then that's when the prime minister says, "Oh, so I see. If you can't get your way, you'll resort to blackmailing." So I think it's
Hmm.
there. It's not like overt. Like I could see how it could be missed,
Hmm.
but I think it is there. But I do think that Captain Picard is probably I think they just didn't have room in the episode to really go on that direction. And granted, because they spend the whole first half of the episode with a lot of scenes that I did think the first half of the episode was a little slow. So maybe they could have like cut at the beginning a little bit,
Mhm.
and then had more exposition about the implications of it and like the consequences of stealing genetic material. But I remember the prime minister arguing we have the right to survive, you know,
Oh yeah, that's true.
and
That's true.
even later on, Counselor Troy, when they're having that meeting right after they destroyed the clones, remember they're in the captain's ready room, and Counselor Troy's like, but you know, what would you do in this situation? There's only five of them, and they had to figure out a way to survive. And she makes a good point. She's like, they're only trying to survive, you know. So she brings another perspective into that scene as well. So
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Although there was one point when I thought there's also a moral question. If you have clones already in process, because that's what happened in the laboratory, and even Riker basically killed them with a phaser shot, but he even looked at Pulaski for a moment, like this is. He didn't say anything, but it was so went through in the scene, like is it the right thing to do to kill them? And Pulaski, with a really deep and sad look, said yes, in without saying anything. And she even turned over her head, like, okay, I don't really want to watch this. Do you think is it it makes them as a murderer, because that's how the prime minister actually referred to them. It's like you two are a murderer because you killed clones, and but while they were just like biomatter in a case, waiting for finish the process or something.
I can only express what I would think in a situation like that. You know, if I were if my genetic material were taken without my knowledge and permission, and a clone were made of me, that was not something that I like was ready or prepared for philosophically. I think I would want to terminate that clone as well. Is it
Mm,
murder? Yeah, I think it is murder. But it's the kind of thing where, you know, I think Riker and Pulaski have to sit with that. You know, they have to like live with that decision. And in that moment, it seemed like the right thing to them. And I think that like it would be interesting to see again in some kind of expand, maybe in you know, Humbert, the doctor usually knows these things better than I do, but that would be a great, I think, lead in to visit the Mariposan colony and talk about it, because I can only imagine like 30 years from now, how would Riker feel about that situation now? Would he have like thought differently as an older Riker, you know, than he did there? And funny enough, Commander Riker has a twin, Thomas
oh
Riker.
yes, Thomas Riker.
So it
Yeah,
actually does
true.
end up happening to him.
And he's quite upset about that.
Yeah, he is quite upset about it. So Riker has a long story ahead with duplicate. Actually, in everyone, like Shinzon is
Oh
Captain
yes,
Picard's clone. You know, like, so
true.
I do like that Star Trek addresses something because about cloning, because I think cloning technology is at a point where it can happen very, I mean, I think highly regulated at the moment, and like there, as far as I know, there are no human clones out there, but you never know, in a laboratory
We
somewhere,
never know,
somewhere in the mountains and in a laboratory, there could be a scientist that's cloning himself or herself, and who knows what's going on unregulated. But it's an interesting thing. Obviously, on Earth, we have the opposite problem. We're not worried about our, you know, our race continuing, you know, so we're not out there making clones of humans as of yet. But I know that there are livestock that we've made clones of, like goats and sheep and, you know, things like that. So it's an interesting thing. Like, we do have the technology to clone, but what would we really use it for? I mean, I
yeah.
can
There's
see.
at the moment there's no point to clone
Yeah.
humans. Although
Well, well, there
although
is.
for organs,
Yeah,
maybe that would
exactly.
be a useful technology.
But we've gotten to a place where we can actually, what I like better than imagine growing a clone just to harvest its organs. That's horrifying, I
No,
think.
that's it. But no, if you just clone the organ itself,
Itself, which
because
is
as
what
long
we
as you have
are.
the
Yeah.
DNA structure for making a human out of a DNA, you can make the same thing with an organ. And in this case, you don't have to grow a human and just get out what you need, like parts from the car. You can just basically you can literally just grow up a liver or a brain, or well, not a brain. I think a brain is a more complicated
I think it.
thing. Just
Well, we believe, yeah, we believe that I think we believe that the knowledge of ourselves sits in the brain. So it would be an interesting thing to grow a brain and transplant it. Would you be yourself? That's a good question. But definitely, yeah, we're entering a time in medicine where I think we're going to see more and more organs being grown and people that have like their own, for example, if you need a replacement liver, it might be your own. So from, grown from your own stem cells or your own liver cells, healthier liver cells. So it's an interesting time that we're going into. And I'm excited about that from a medical perspective, because I think that, it can mean longer life for humans, and we can actually do things we never dreamt about. So it'll be an interesting time
maybe not
up ahead.
just longer life, maybe better life in terms of health.
Yeah. But one
Getting
argues with these people who have access to this now, would they drink excessively, knowing that they can just get a replacement of their own liver? Would they, so there are lots of interesting questions that come about it. But I think that a very good question, going back to Riker and Pulaski. I personally myself think that they did the right thing, because it teaches the Mariposans, while there is a crime being committed in the sense that these proto versions of themselves, not
Mhm.
fully rendered versions, if you will, but still possibly life forms, were killed. It does teach the Mariposans that they can't just steal what they want. The first wrong, the bigger wrong, I think, was when they forcibly took Commander Riker and Dr. Pulaski's genetic material.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes more sense now.
Cool. Anything else? That was really good.
Um, no, I'm just have a look in my little list, but not that I recall.
I
No, I think that's it from me.
I like the ending in the conference room where uh, Danilo, Odell, and the prime minister shake hands, and he says, "Send in the clones." And I thought that was a funny.
Oh, and you know what? Actually, that comes to one because that's supposed to be the original title of the episode.
Right, that's right. I read that, "Send in the clones," which is an
So it
interesting.
made it.
And it's an interesting reference to "Send in the Clowns," which is a song that I love. So
Oh.
yeah, check it out. Dame Judy Dench sings it the best, I think, if you
Ah, okay.
want
I
to
will
hear
definitely check
a
it out.
good version. But Barbara Streisand also sings it, and it's really well done. Anyway,
There was a scene in when Picard enters with Riker to the cargo bay at the first time, and they see all these people and the animals and everything. And at one point, Picard starts to laugh, and
oh yeah,
and
we talked
Riker
about
just
that's
like,
right.
what's happening, Captain? Like, sometimes when you face the absurd, you don't do anything, just laugh. And
Yeah,
this is what I
and
felt after Tuesday.
that's a
At one
wonderful
point.
point. Yeah, he says, I think his exact line was something like, sometimes you just have to bow to the absurd.
Oh,
And
yes,
I
yes,
think,
yeah, that was the correct one.
that's exactly, exactly right. So here we are on Starfleet Boy, bowing to the absurd, but hopefully not bowing to the incorrect. And
Yeah, we wouldn't love to go into darkness. We want to go beyond.
we want to, yeah. well, well done. So I think I'll wrap it up, and I say thank you again for another for coming on the show again, and
I thank you
for
the
another
option too.
wonderful discussion. And we will say live long and prosper, and see
Live
you
long
next
and
time.
prosper. See you.